And can you all share, can you all see my screen? I'm going to take just a couple minutes and share a few slides to kind of give us some context about this session. And then the bulk of this session is really going to be a chance for us to hear from some phenomenal people who have been involved in doing this work. And so I want to make sure we leave time primarily for that. Before we get into any content, let me give a chance for introductions. My name is Willow Jacobson. I'm with the School of Government. I'm on the faculty there, and I've had the great chance to be involved with this project since the first forum, and kind of really thinking about those process elements while you all are doing the work in this content area, and for the group in public health, really thinking about those contents. My expertise is more in the area of organizational theory and process, so spending time thinking about those elements. Let me ask if my co-presenters will, I'm just going to go down the list and start with you, Victoria. We'll make a quick introduction about, and I'd ask that you share what team you're with and also what your day job is, because you all have day jobs, and I think that helps to represent the diversity of the type of participants we have who are volunteering and choosing to give their time to these important collaboratives.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Victoria Beaton. I am the project coordinator for the Mecklenburg County team. Our team's actually called the SUD Task Force. But that is actually part of my day job. I work at a substance use prevention and treatment agency, and I work on the prevention side of things, doing community work. So this, my agency donates my time to act as the project coordinator.
Great, thank you. Dwayne, I'm going to move over to you.
Okay, and I'm pretty sure the group there joining us probably well aware, but I'm Dwayne Holder, and I am the Deputy County Manager here in Cumberland County. And I'm one of the core team members of the Cumberland-Fayetteville Opioid Response Team. And actually, when I started the work with the task force, I was actually serving as the county's interim health director, and also as an assistant county manager. So pretty diverse skill set there, obviously.
And Wendy.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Dwayne, on where you are now. I'm Wendy Jacobs. I am chair of the Durham County Board of Commissioners, and I am co-chair with Wanda Boone of our effort in Durham, which is called Durham Joins Together to Save Lives, and is our countywide task force to address medication and substance misuse in Durham County. And I got involved with this starting in February 2018, when we had a countywide forum being initiated by the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. And so since that time, I've just been involved with, helping to lead the project. And Wanda is a leader of a community-based organization.
Thank you all for that. So as you can see, we have a wide range in terms of folks coming from different places and different positions. And so I'm excited for the conversation we're going to get to have. Let me just give some context as we get started. And this builds off of what Adam was talking about this morning, that really thinking about the collective impact model, this notion of kind of being on the same page and figuring out where you're going. So agreeing where you want to go is a key part. What we found is that so many people came to this issue from lots of different perspectives. And so how do you help people get on the same page of where they want to go? And so in an early conversation, I will admit to having stolen this from Dwayne, is it's really that notion of how do we get people on the same page and how do we keep them there? And so one of the ways we talk a lot about that is thinking about having some shared vision to allow people to come together. But one of the things with collective impact is it's really looking at problems in new ways and helping people let go of the specific angle they may have on the problem to try to think of more collective ways to address it. And so throughout this process, we really focused on this notion of creating a common agenda where all participants have a shared vision for change. And a big part of that is also a common understanding of the problem. And that is really interesting as you think about this topic, as you bring together folks from very different parts of our community to address this, from judicial to police to public health to faith-based. Understanding how we understand that problem, the terms we use, the stigmas people have, that really takes work as a group to come up and agree on what is the problem we're trying to address, which part, sometimes it's part of the problem, sometimes it's more systemic issues, and what is a joint approach for solving it. And that again is that part of mutually reinforcing activities of the collective impact model, which is to say, we all control different parts of this. How do we collectively put our efforts together to address this in new ways? Adam stole my slide this morning, so you've already seen this, but the notion here is really thinking about how do we align. And so what we've seen for years is on these really complex problems such as opioids and poverty and other big, what we call wicked problems, is that there are lots of wonderful people who've been working on these problems, but sometimes their efforts are going in different direction. And so our hope with this model and with the hard work that our communities are doing is how do we get people moving in the same direction on the problem? And again, agreeing what the problem is a really critical first step. There's another session on that you can go to after this, but don't leave now. That pushing kind of what is the problem. And so I'll be honest to say that I think our goal is that collective impact where every effort is reinforcing. If we get to coordinated impact, that's still a pretty good process. So I think sometimes we act like we got to get to the end. And I just want to recognize that I think for a lot of our teams, we've really gotten more to coordinated impact with alignment. And that's great. And it's part of where we need to go and where the work needs to happen. But we have to know where we're going to get that coordinated or collective impact. I want to just note that as we started this process, and I'll be curious what my colleagues say about this, one of the things we also recognized is people use these terms all the time, and we don't always share the same definitions of them, right? So one person will say what a statement and say, this is our vision, and somebody else will say, that's not a vision, that's a mission. Somebody else will say values and say, well, our values are our goals. And so part of this, again, in terms of the shared agenda, was agreeing what terms meant, what terms we use, and how we really position them in the conversations we have as a group. So a lot of the kind of work of the School of Government was to say, let's give you some process and context to help have some shared terms and terminology as you move forward. The teams have worked through, and this is one of those disconcerting slides to me because you can put it up and just say, well, create a vision and then develop some goals, objectives, you have some strategies and you're done. This is a lot of work. I recently did this for an internal group and thought, gosh, we asked the teams to do so much because agreeing on a vision takes weeks. And then trying to define goals takes a long time. But the hope is that they're reinforcing towards, again, let's make sure that the choices we made in terms of our tactics and strategies are the right one to achieve the vision we've agreed to as a group. And part of that is also recognizing that for our teams, there may be lots of times in which different individual agencies or groups may be doing something where they say, this is what I do as part of my other job, right? Dwayne may say, this is part of what the county is going to do. This may be separate from the collaborative because we still have tactics that we may undertake that aren't part of this collaborative. When thinking about establishing this, the leadership team that shares these definitions, really important. And then one of the things that I just encourage groups when they think about coming together is recognizing that stakeholders are going to need to know what's in it for them. So as somebody comes to the table and says, well, I've been working on opioids, I've been working on these issues for a long time, why be involved with this collaborative opposed to the way we've already been doing it? how do I fit under this umbrella? So it is creating a common agenda large enough to include everybody, but not so large that it has no meaning or collective oomph. And so how do you make sure that umbrella fits folks within it, but also helps people know that this may not be the group that I'm going to put my talents and energies into? That vision is what binds us together of why we want to come to do this work, that we see a future that we want to help build together. So we asked the teams to develop a vision, which we talked about as an ideal and unique image of a future for the common good. And again, recognizing if you've all worked in different settings, if somebody has a vision that's really inspiring, you get excited. Even though you know it's going to be hard to work on it, if you can describe a future folks want to be part of, it helps take their talents and energy and put it towards this collective effort that we're trying to build. The teams got to do this a couple times in Forum 1. They, back 2 years ago, they did this, and then they revisited it. And one of the things we asked is to have them work on kind of thinking about being clear about their desired destination, dreaming big, again, a unique future, an ideal future, and communicating that strong purpose. One of the common strategies to do that is to say, can you put your vision on a t-shirt? And so the teams actually created, though they were paper, t-shirts where they shared their vision and got a chance to really think through those choices of words and what bound them together. And the teams developed really phenomenal examples of what their vision was and how it creates that common agenda for folks to work on and to be able to articulate as they invite others in, but also how to hold ourselves accountable, because it is easy to have what we talk about as vision or mission drift, which is other opportunities and things come up and we have to make the hard choices of, is that what we want to work on together? Maybe that's a project for another group, or maybe that is within the vision that we have created. And so again, that vision should be that glue that helps us make decisions and helps bind us together. So really it's about that hard work of where are we going, and then helping people stay on, especially as things get hard. How do we keep people together on the same page? So I'm gonna stop my share here and so we can see each other a little bit better, and say that what I'd like to do now is just raise some questions for the panelists to get to respond to in terms of how we think about common agendas and how we think about kind of agreeing where we want to go together, or as we've talked about it as a group, getting people on the same page and keeping them on that same page, or agreeing as a group that we need to have a new page, which also can happen in this process. So I want to start by raising the question about how has having a shared vision really helped your team? What has that done for you? And I'm going to ask Victoria and Dwayne to respond to this question if they will. So I'm going to go with you first, Victoria, if that's okay.
Sure. So our team was actually in existence before the grant. We started in 2015, and about the time the grant came around, we were kind of at a fork in the road. We had me come on as a coordinator, and I think it was just a point to evaluate where we were going from there, because we had 3 opioid summits in our community. So there was a lot of community energy. How do we harness that? And the grant process really helped us nail down into what's important to our team, and creating the shared agenda helped kind of unify those voices, gave us a lot of different perspectives that allowed us to form our work groups ultimately. And the shared vision kind of brought everybody together under a broad umbrella, because our vision includes the term that we want our community to be recovery supportive. And that can mean, different things to different people. And I think it just allows priorities to shift and change, and while still having a clear intent and a clear focus on what we want to accomplish.
just want to underscore that those words in this field, the words are so big that finding that those common meaning behind them and having those hard discussions about what do we mean by recovery focused is the hard work that I've seen you all do and other groups do of saying, what does this really mean when we say this? Thank you. Dwayne, how has having a shared vision helped your team?
I think it's interesting because kind of going back to the beginning of the work here in Cumberland, as Victoria said, our community had actually started an initiative in 2016, and it was actually started by a former mayor of the city of Fayetteville, and it brought together a lot of different people from different sectors, but that effort was not sustained, and it just sort of died on the vine after probably 2017, right about a year. It kind of fizzled out, and when the grant came about, it was a great opportunity for a rebirth of that initiative. And so it wasn't as hard to pull people back to the table. But we had a different assembly of players at the table. A lot of the same agencies represented, but some of the different players. And as far as visioning is concerned, I think when we first came together, everybody had their own vision, of what they saw. And it really took it's a little embarrassing to say, but it took almost over a year for us to even come up with a common vision. So it wasn't until January of this year that we actually formed a unified vision statement. So it takes some time, and we had to make sure that it was broad enough to encompass what everyone was looking for, but and also aspirational at the same time. And so actually being able to come up with that shared vision, not only did it get everyone on the same page, but it actually shaped our work, because we found the opportunity to create subcommittees or breakout groups from our task force based on our vision. So that was very helpful.
So I just want to underscore two things. One, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but that notion of the vision helps allow you to create process and structure, because if you have a clear vision, it allows, and I think Victoria, you mentioned this as well, is it allowed us to figure out what teams we should have. If this is what we want to do, then now we know how to build the right structure or kind of organization to do that. And also, I wouldn't say it embarrassing. I would say you did the hard work to actually not just put up a vision, because we see groups do that where they just write a vision statement. They're like, this is good enough. But if it isn't bought in, if it's not aspirational, then it doesn't have the power. And so doing that hard work isn't a one-time effort. It is a reoccurring effort until it really is a lived document. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask us about the kind of some of the challenges, right? So and I think Dwayne alluded to some of this in answering this question as well, is that really finding one that was big enough to include people and was still aspirational. But what have been the largest challenges you faced or overcome related to developing something that you see as a sustainable and shared vision or agenda for your team? And let me ask Commissioner Jacobs if she'll answer this first.
Well, our process, ironically, us starting Durham Joins Together kind of overlapped with the opioid grant opportunity. So both really just happened concurrently for us. And I think that really benefited us in terms of having the dedicated, resources and staff to help us with that process. Because as I mentioned, our effort, we didn't have pre-existing efforts like Dwayne and Victoria did. Ours came out of a big leadership forum that was attended by probably over 100 different stakeholders in February of 2018. And I think for us, the process of focusing on a joint vision and also mission, both statements I kind of think for us were integrated, is that it was a way for us to not also dismiss the efforts that were already going on. Even though we didn't have an effort going on, there were still people who had already been working on things for a long time. And there's a sense that we don't want to diminish or ignore what people have already been doing. So how do you pull people together and it's broad enough that you are acknowledging the work that they have already been doing? I think that for us, that was really one of the biggest challenges. Some of the hiccups that we had was not offending, groups that were already meeting and doing things. How do you bring everybody together in a way that you are lifting up the community-based efforts or the even institutional efforts, and not say we're not trying to replace you, we're trying to build on what you're doing. So I think that that's an important part of the process.
So I think you're exactly right. I think it's easy for a group to come in and act as if like you all didn't fix it. So now let us be the ones who are going to come in and fix this for you, opposed to recognizing one of the collective impact's premise is that collective impact is about honoring technical expertise, but contextual expertise as well, that the communities and the folks within the community who have knowledge and perspectives. And so honoring and being inclusive without making it seem like you're diminishing their efforts is a true challenge across the board. Thank you for that. Victoria, did you guys face challenges or obstacles that you'd like to share? I'm just guessing Mecklenburg is kind of big and you might have had a couple.
Oh yeah. As the most urban county in the state, we ran into challenges with, competing priorities in our county. There's so many important social justice, social health issues. So how do we get people to buy into this opioid crisis that we're trying to solve? And I think that challenge, we still haven't fully figured it out because, there's always, and, in the political system, there's evolving players, there's, always new people coming into our pond. And what we have learned is that it takes trust and flexibility to get people to buy in. I think having a clear agenda and vision does help when we can bring people in and say, this is where we see you fitting in. Is this like what your expertise matches up with? So I think having, clear, points of action for people is really helpful. So I think, yeah, definitely getting lots of people on the same page is tough. But I think we're getting there. And I think that's where we've also come to needing data to help really show what our work or what our task force has done. Because you can't really buy in if you're just like, well, we're doing all this great work, and people are like, well, where's your information to back it up? So that's where we're heading in the future for sustainability, is being able to more clearly and have the data to say, this is what we've done and this is what we've accomplished and this is why you want to be on our team.
So I think that point of having, and you guys have all talked about these aspirational visions are really big and are things that you need those datas or those midpoints to celebrate, because you're not going to solve it overnight. And so having that ability to celebrate small wins along the way and know that you're achieving the steps up that huge mountain that you're climbing together. And so data and other ways to create that celebration becomes really important. Victoria, you mentioned keeping people on target. So that actually is my next question that I want to raise, and I'm going to ask Wendy and Dwayne to talk a little bit about how do you help people kind of stay on target? Again, it's easy to, especially as COVID and other things come up, kind of divert attentions. How do you do this in a way either through structure or process or through this agenda that helps keep you all moving? And I'm going to ask you all to answer that, but I also want to remind our participants that if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We have some questions, but I also will open it up. There's not a ton of us, so I don't think we have to do everything by chat, but I also want to open that up as we go along. So Dwayne, do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys have thought about structure and process to help through this kind of getting people to have a shared agenda or shared vision?
Well, I know it's cliche, but communication is the key. And one of the things that has really helped to keep us on track has been our coordinator. And I just, you know, as I think about our coordinator, she's been glue. She's been a shepherd. She's been a cheerleader, a coach, you name it. She's served in that role, and the communication, you know, has to be frequent. It has to be constant, and then coupled with a good coordinator has been having key people that remain committed to the process throughout it. I mean, you're going to have, in an effort like this, and I've been involved in other efforts in the past, and it's kind of par for the course that you're going to have people coming and going. But you've got to have some key people that remain invested for the long term in the process. And so, I'm saying long term, it's been 2 years. For us, that's felt like a long time. It's not really, but it's felt like that. But it's a good feeling because it's been sustained. And I'll just say that the involvement from the School of Government has helped to sustain that, and those assignments that we've received and the objectives that we've gone through, in addition to helping to guide our work and our process, it's kept people bought in. And so it's been hard work, but it's kept us working. So
that's good to hear, because sometimes we just hear that we don't want to do assignments. So it's good to know. Wendy, do you have some thoughts on kind of how you keep people on target, how you create structure or process that helps facilitate that?
Yeah, so I agree with what Dwayne said about communication and needing the coordinator, and also we've had some staff support from our public health department, just, you know, sending out the emails and the minutes and all those things too. So you've got to have that type of staff support. But I think for us, the structure that we created has been very important. I mentioned not building on what really was already happening. And I think that everybody is so busy and already has so much work that creating a structure where we weren't adding on another meeting for people. And so what we did was we created basically 4 different committees. We have a policy group that's kind of overarching, and then we have an education and prevention committee, mental health and treatment committee, and then we started out also with a data committee. And to be honest, the data committee and the policy committee were the only 2 new committees. the education and treatment, the education prevention was already happening within a community-based organization called TRI, Together for Resilient Youth. And so more people, they were already meeting monthly. And so more people joined into who wanted to work on education and prevention from all the different, our usual silos, joining in across the county, and with a focus now on the vision and the mission being what the focus was. And then the same thing with the mental health and treatment. There was a group that was already meeting out of, out of our kind of partnership for a healthy Durham and Duke Health System and other groups. They were already meeting, but again, we renamed that group, and again brought more people into it. And so they've continued to meet monthly with this new focus. And then we all meet together as a task force every quarter. And so we've allowed everybody to have the independence. I think that has been important, and not micromanaging. And then the data group started out as an individual new group, but then we realized that data needed to be integrated into education and prevention and integrated into mental health and treatment. So they started going to the other two meetings instead of having their own separate meeting. And then the other structural thing that I think has tied everyone together is that we've gotten 3 different grants. And I think we've been able to get those grants because of the collaboration and everybody working together on those grants has already also kept that communication and everyone working together. So it's been kind of iterative, and so I think that's what has really been effective for us.
I think that recognition that lots of folks are working on it, and how do you not create more? Because I can tell you and I'm guessing for the folks who are joining us today, but I can tell you, having watched you all and your colleagues on these teams, the folks who are giving their time to this initiative are already busy and attending a lot of meetings and working on a lot of things. So figuring out how not to, again, add the layers, but incorporate and reinforce the efforts and the work that's happening.
And I'll just add, Willow, this sounds really silly, but when we have our meetings, we keep to the time. And so we say, the meeting is going to start at this time, it's going to end at this time. And I think because of that, we have very good attendance. People know we're going to be respectful of their time, we're going to be efficient, sharing information and all of that, but we really, really are very strict about it.
I don't think that sounds silly, and I wish you could reinforce that on more meetings I go to, because it makes it really hard to show up when you're like, it said it was going to be an hour, but now we're here 2 hours in, or we never got to the agenda item I came for because we let the first 2 go too long. So again, I just want to highlight that we talk a lot about vision as that aspirational aspect, but the process part is critical, right? Like the model talks about having a backbone organization, the constant communication. Those aspects are really critical to make sure that people feel like they know where they belong, understand what they're working on, and can fit in. And I think these lessons, and I know people have probably heard them before, but I don't think it ever hurts to reinforce the lessons of communication. And as Victoria said, helping people know their roles and where they fit in. And, good meeting management can change somebody's experience 100%. So speaking of good meeting management, let me ask, before we get to the end of our time, let me ask my last question. And again, if we have questions from the audience, please don't hesitate to chime in. My last one is just kind of that big one, that kind of anything else you would say in terms of the greatest lessons you have about getting people on the same page and keeping them there. Or a different way to ask that is, what would you do the same or differently if you all had to go back in time? Dwayne talked about it took about a year. I think that's because you did the hard work. But if there's things you would have done differently as lessons, I'd love to give you all a chance to share those. And I'm going to see who jumps or leans in or unmutes first to answer that.
Well, since I'm already unmuted,
I was gonna say Dwayne stayed unmuted because he's always ready.
No, I wouldn't say that. That's for sure. But lessons to share, I would say, and I think Commissioner Jacobs may have mentioned this, but patience. It takes a lot of patience to do this work and to be involved in trying to achieve and work toward this collective impact. I think also you've got to make sure that people's motives are pure in doing this type of work and in being involved in this kind of initiative, because if you're just at the table for political reasons or personal reasons, you can contribute, but you're probably not going to stick around very long, because you don't necessarily get those easy and instant wins. The wins in this, I've learned to measure wins in this effort by people showing up to meetings, by making sure that people know who to call when they have an issue, right? Those are things that didn't necessarily exist before, but now that we have this collaborative, at least people know who to call and what everyone is doing as a part of the system that they didn't know before. So those sometimes seem like small things, but they're huge, especially when you're talking about trying to help people that are in need. Last thing I'll say as far as doing things differently, I think we probably underestimated the amount of coordinator time that we needed. That's one thing I would say. If we were starting this over, I think we would probably try to build more time into the coordinator role.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left. Let me see if Wendy or Victoria have any kind of last lessons they want to share.
Yeah, I'll just quickly follow up on what Dwayne said. We've realized too that the coordinator position is absolutely vital. It's been, the reason we've been able to drive so many initiatives. I can send 100 friendly emails reminding you that this is due at 5 o'clock today. But yeah, so I think establishing the structure, and then the only other thing I would add is just, I mentioned flexibility earlier, and I think you're never too far along in the process to revisit your agenda, revisit what's important to your team, and that it's a good idea to check in with your team on, are we still doing the important work that's important to everybody at our collaborative.
I think that's a great point about checking in and revisiting. Wendy, do you have a lesson? Let's have you be the last lesson we have before we have to break into other breakout rooms.
I think that one of my lessons would be that there is a need to take a break and kind of reassess where you are, and even revisit the vision and the mission statement, and periodically, and see where you at. That's kind of where we're at right now. We've really neglected our policy committee, and thanks to School of Government, we've been benefiting from the help of Robert Albright, who's an expert on collective impact, who's been helping us kind of take step back and see, where are we, what are we doing, what do we need to kind of realign. And I think we've also not done a good job with, I think the internal communication is important, but then the external. And for us, where we've really, I think, missed the boat is on communicating what are we doing with people outside of the task force and the larger community. And so that's, and then we're just where are we headed? Unfortunately, funding is a huge problem, and we've got some great things happening, but what is going to be the sustainability and how are we going to sustain those? Those would be some of my view of our lessons learned right now.
Thank you. Well, thank you to my panel. Thank you for those of us who joined us.